Thank you for joining us for another episode of A Mental Health Break. This week, we are going to look into how the mental health discussion for men has been quiet for way too long. Today's guest runs a brand offering mental health support for dads. I connected with today's mental health star via Instagram after learning how he highlights support and resources for dads who may need support for their mental health. Mental health as a whole has slowly but surely become a more spoken about topic. But I know, for example, dad's age group right now, when they were kids, the mental health discussion was nowhere near where it is today. And they were taught to hide their emotions, hide their feelings. They're men. And today's guest is shattering that stigma. Get ready to learn all about what today's guest does for the mental health community. But before we bring him on, we have to learn how he podcasts. John, which platform do you stream your podcast through?
Normally Spotify, if I'm honest. Yeah.
Spotify.
Nice and easy. Yeah.
I enjoy how they do the wrapped up at the end of the year. My podcast that I host through there, They give me the wrapped up. But for podcasts, I do stick with Apple because it's with the phone. I try to just keep everything simple. They got me there. But when in the day do you typically listen to your shows?
Yeah, that was a really good question, actually. Anytime really, but I try and do it when I'm running, or I try and listen when I'm I guess so really kind of probably better in the morning. I think as the day goes by, I think that my concentration wanes, but I only really listen to podcasts that I can zone in and concentrate on. So yeah, in the morning probably.
Yeah, I'm a big morning guy. I start my day 2-3 a.m. The days I'm working religiously. It's my regimen. I'm lights out in the morning, come afternoon. I'm just not as sharp. So we know you listen to in the morning. We know how you listen. Where do you normally listen? If it's in the car, in the gym?
Yeah, so I run a lot. Well, I run a little bit. I don't run a lot. That was a lie. I try and run as much as I can. I listen when I'm running. I listen in the car. So my day job, I work in manufacturing. I work for I market for a manufacturing firm, and my commute is about 45 minutes. So I stick some podcasts on for my commute in the car. I sometimes listen at my desk because I work from home a little bit. So I sometimes put my earphones in, but to be honest, like I say, I like to concentrate. So if I'm doing work, I can't concentrate on the podcast. So I don't do two things at once like that.
Yeah, certain tasks are difficult to multitask on. Thank you for sharing how you podcast. That voice is the sound of today's awesome guest. Welcome back to another episode of A Mental Health Break. I am your host and author of the books Mental Health Week and Mr. Lancey Talks Mental Health, Vincent A. Lancey. You can check out both of those books on Amazon and learn more about me at Vincent A. Lancey across all social media, YouTube, and my website is vincentalancey.com. If this is your first time stopping by, I sit down and have a mental health talk with an advocate or professional from around the world each week on this podcast. I began focusing on mental health after suffering a traumatic brain injury, and that is my why relating to mental health. You will learn different whys each week relating to mental health advocacy. And for today, we have John, who is a dad, husband, marketer, counselor, mental health first aider, peer group facilitator, charity trustee, and local governing officer for a mental health provision. He also has a podcast and is a regular guest on podcasts that talk all things mental health, masculinity, and fatherhood. John is here today to continue to share his experience, his testimony, and knowledge to help equalize mental health support for all. That includes man, woman, and child, and has also delivered many keynotes to NHS and Public Health England on fathers' mental health, which I enjoyed learning as a speaker myself. So allow me to now bring him on. John Stacey. John, I'm excited to sit down with you today.
Thank you for having me. That was a lovely intro and a great start to the pod. And thank you for having me on. Hopefully everybody
happy to have
gets
you,
something
man.
from this. Hopefully everybody listens and enjoys it.
You have a lot to offer, and as the show goes on, that will just become more and more evident. Would you mind starting by introducing yourself to the world? Let them know who John is before we dive into mental health talk.
Yeah, so obviously all of those different hats, all of those different pies that you said I had my hand in. That's me. I'm John. I'm from the East Midlands in the UK. I'm 36. So I live near the coast-ish, about an hour away from the coast on the east coast of the UK of England. Yeah, I mean, I'm a layman. I kind of describe myself as just an everyman. I'm, just a normal guy on the street who has decided that normal doesn't really work anymore with regards to what the generational issues are around mental health, mainly after my own journey began with mental health, and always been quite an outspoken person, and decided to turn that into something positive with regards to mental health. And my own journey, sharing that with others has been a massive part of that, as well as kind of aligning myself with that power of relatability. So, I am an everyman. I'm not exceptional at anything, I don't think, which is a great thing. It's a great power in itself. And I think that, everybody I work with and everybody that I've helped along the way, I certainly see a lot of myself in every single person, and hopefully they see that in me and can relate to it. I think that's about me, really.
Yeah, it's a great introduction. You said a lot of big points there, and we're going to dive right into really what led you to being a mental health advocate. You mentioned you had a personal journey. The obvious, more talked about types of mental health disparities are the mood and anxiety disorders, some schizophrenia disorders. What did you go through personally?
Yeah, so I started my journey actually kind of in that stereotype of I don't agree with mental health being a thing. I don't believe in it kind of thing. I was that guy. I was that stereotype that, if someone had anxiety, they worried too much. If someone was depressed, they were just sad and needed to cheer up. And I had some physical health problems, had migraines, had issues that was worrying me for the first time, like severe enough to worry me about it being brain related, perhaps a tumor or something. And incidentally, I'm really glad that it wasn't that. But I went to the doctors here who referred me to lots of different methods of trying to find out what it was. And essentially, we decided it was stress related, and it was to do with a lot of different things. And fast forward, 4, 5, 6 years of my 8-year journey since I've been learning about my own mind and my own mental health, I guess I realized that through different types of therapy, I've struggled for best part of 30 years, 25, 30 years with anxiety. I've battled depression at times. I have low mood, just like most of us really. I've definitely had control issues and anger issues and reactive sort of emotional issues. And I've really had to learn, for me at quite a late age, how to become more emotionally intelligent and more in tune with my emotions and more in tune with what's going on in my mind. So yeah, I guess the best way I normally describe my own kind of afflictions or kind of problems that I have, I talk to people and I say I've got a little bit of most things, which sounds really bad, but like I'm never really diagnosed fully. I've never been diagnosed fully with anything severe, which is great, which I'm grateful for. But I really do feel like I flit in and out of things. I very recently, and I'm sure we'll get on to talking about this, I very recently have been kind of researching and doing my own work around ADHD, because I really do feel like at times the more I learn about ADHD, the more I think, damn, that's me. That's me. Like I've been probably with ADHD for a while, So, and that's not a bad thing. It's a great thing that I'm really feeling liberated about. So yeah, that's me. That's kind of what I've been battling with.
I appreciate your honesty and your courage to hop on this show, share your story to help others. And as I mentioned, men especially, these conversations are slowly building as the whole mental health conversation, is slowly building. But through this experience, was there a specific moment where you decided, okay, it's time for me to share my story? Or was it always something you planned on doing?
No, it wasn't something I always planned on doing. Actually, that's a really interesting question, actually, because I was kind of on a bit of a kind of 4 or 5 year sort of, the part of the 8 years was about 4 or 5 years in, and I started the MH Sport for Dads channel on Instagram as a signposting channel where I just literally tried to find great resources for fathers, and I would post it, and it just wasn't really going anywhere. It wasn't really hitting enough people. So I was sat there, and I work in marketing, so I kind of know what works. And I kind of sat there and I goes, right, I need to reach more people. I need to put my face to this. I need to start telling my story. I need to start telling people, I'm a dad too. This is run by a dad who's actually has mental health issues and has down days. And the pivotal moment, I think, was after I introduced myself to the channel. I did a post where I was having a really bad day, One summer, it was the summer just after COVID started, I believe, or maybe it was the year before, maybe a couple of years ago. And I was sat in my garden, and my wife had taken a picture of my daughter, and it was a beautiful picture of her playing in the garden. And in the background, I was sat there on a chair, and I was just slumped in the chair on my phone, and I looked so sad and so upset with life. And that picture, spoke 1,000 words. My wife, my daughter playing happily, and me in the background really struggling on that day. And to describe what I was struggling with on that day, nothing. It was my demons. It was just nothing had triggered that. It was just what was going on, and I was just having a horrible day. And I had to articulate it. I needed to articulate it. It felt great to articulate it. And from that moment on, my channel just kind of upward trajectory. Lots of people messaging me, lots of people commenting, lots of amazing connections, hundreds of amazing connections like yourself, where people had followed me, I'd follow them back, great content flying around. And then that's just it. It's just snowballs. And it's literally led me to that long old list of hats that I've got since, because I've realized that actually just telling my story, but learning along the way, learning from other people and inspiring them with my story, but inspiring them with knowledge and theory too. It just is a great help. That help of community, that help of like people helping people. I just think is just insanely amazing. So that's the pivotal point for me, I think. Yeah, definitely.
The conversation goes a long way. One of my many motivations for starting this podcast, one of the many goals I have for it, is for people to relate with my guests, no matter how it is, where they're from, what they went through, how they're overcoming it, what they overcome, you name it. The guests can help you, because you learn from firsthand experiences. Books go a long way. I'm a career academic. If it was free, I'd go to school forever. But certain things you need to experience firsthand. For example, I heard from a lot of doctors what may happen with my TBI, traumatic brain injury, for everyone who's new to the show, what would happen, what could happen. But I had very few firsthand interaction from someone what they actually went through, which would have alleviated a lot of stress and uncertainty from it. So you're doing a big service, but you've obviously learned a lot in your 8 years on this journey. What are some things that work well for you, either short term or long term? Please share.
I think one thing I've really learned is, obviously there's a real big obvious elephant in the room sometimes, and that is that we don't talk enough. We don't open up enough. We don't talk. And I have become, I guess, a lot more shrewd in how I talk. So I've always been able to talk, but I've never been able to talk effectively about what I really want to speak about. So I've become really good at doing that, as well as become a lot better at listening. So a lot more active listening, a lot more actual kind of like, resource information, staying in kind of thing, rather than zoning out and just letting it look like I'm listening, But I think the short-term, long-term tools, long-term, those are long-term. I think those talking and listening things, everybody should be doing that all the time. Short-term, I massively prescribe to finding your own method of relaxation, whether that's meditation, yoga, breathing exercises, and everything in between. I'm a very, very, very big advocate of originality in there. So there's a load of techniques. There's a load of techniques out there, and I think they're all amazing and they all work for certain people. The huge thing that I tell people is that all of these things might not work for you. So make them work for you. Make them work for you. Like, take something like the box breathing technique. If you've never heard of it, it's basically where you breathe in a box. I'm sure you know what I mean. But if somebody Googled that right now, you'd find 3 or 4 different ways of doing it. And my advice to people is make your own way. Make your own way. So I tell people the basics, and I basically say, learn your own way. So my little weird things that I do, and I call them weird because they are my little weird things. I stand in the mirror at night before I go to bed, and I'm brushing my teeth, and I do my journaling in my mind and in a monologue. I never journal. I can't write it down. I just don't like that kind of diarizing things. Don't know why, but I just don't resonate with it. So I stand in that mirror and I reflect on the day, and I journal the day, and I take some gratitude. I look at the negatives. I see if I can learn from it. For that 2 minutes, I'm zoned out. I'm talking to myself eye to eye, and it can either be in my mind or it can be vocal, and I can have a quick chat, and it's private. I'm in the bathroom. It's just the way it works for me. And I go to bed when I have those moments, feeling very relaxed and moved on from the day. I don't always do it. I don't always need to do it, but it's a very good little technique I've picked up and developed. So,
well, an amazing point you said there was what works for some doesn't always work for everyone. Everyone is unique. All of our brains are unique. There is no one brain like another brain. Try a bunch of things. The worst thing that happens is you don't enjoy it. Nothing's changed. The best thing that happens is you find a new practice that can not only improve yourself mentally, but physically, because when you think well, you feel well. But I mentioned how he's involved in a lot of support groups for fathers, doing a big push on that front. What else are you working on to raise awareness for the importance of mental health here, John?
Yeah, so I have my own company locally. It's called a CIC in the UK, which is a community interest company. So
Okay.
it's a non-profit. It has a revenue stream, but that money goes straight into activities. But it's called Men Talk Links. So Lincolnshire is where I'm based. So Men Talk Links, and it is prioritizing men's activity and men's mental health generally, but it actually doesn't exclude. So we do stuff for women, we do stuff for children. I do a schools project within that where I work with teenagers. We do activity-based talking groups and private sort of counseling, 12-week development programs, all these different things. So that's my main sort of labor of love right now on the side of my actual day job. So a lot of my time goes into that. And essentially what we want to do eventually, it's only been going about a year, is we want to expand it as a franchise around the UK, where as a franchise,
That's
as a
awesome.
non-profit franchise, every county that needs it can have this, and it can make its own money. Yes, it'll have charitable money and donations everywhere because people want to give money, which is fantastic, but it'll work with local communities and local businesses to encourage more mental health and encourage more talking and encourage more mental health activities for men, women and children. It's a completely novel method. It's not done anywhere else that I've ever come across. It's done very similar in smaller brackets, so like around certain things and niches, but we don't have niches. We just do everything that we can, and we get volunteers involved to do whatever we can as well. Yeah, that's my big thing at the minute. So
You're a very big thinker. You have very ambitious goals, and I think that as well is good for your mental health, because if you have a purpose in life, you push and you gravitate yourself till that moment, that goal, until it's manifested. Thank you for the inspiration there. You've been inspiring me the whole show. And now our audience has the opportunity to get your take on this week's Spotlight story. If this is your first show with us, every single episode, I share the Spotlight story of someone who's famous or in the celebrity light of some sort, because I want to let you know you are not alone. You have to understand that even though someone looks healthy from the outside, they may not be on the inside too. This write-up is going to be on the host of ABC's Extreme Makeover, Ty Pennington, and there was a lot going on in this article. I'm going to share many key points. In his childhood, he didn't know he had ADHD. In grade school, his hyperactivity seemed that it was in the way of everything he tried to accomplish, and because of this, he spent a lot of time in detention, I learned. By his own account, he says he swung on the blinds, ran out of the classroom, playfully slapped other students on the back of the head. This is a quote I'm reading when he was speaking to the Huffington Post about the ADHD as a kid. My mom was studying to be a child psychologist, and she went to my elementary school to test the worst kid they have. They were like, Mrs. Pennington, you really don't want to know who that is. They let her observe me through a window, and within 20 minutes, I stripped naked, wore my desk around, and swung on the blinds. I was just a complete distraction to all the other students. Back then, they didn't even know what to call it. They put me on antihistamines to try and make me drowsy. They tried everything. It certainly affected my confidence and my belief in myself. When everyone's afraid you're going to hurt yourself from just mowing the lawn, you start to believe them. Once I figured out that I was pretty decent at art and people would be interested in hiring me, I realized I had skills besides injuring myself. What's kind of funny is that I ended up working with my power tools to pay my way through art school and still have all my digits. A lot going on here. What do you take away from this?
yeah, I think it's brilliant that I guess in his life he's older now, isn't he? And that he's kind of coming to that conclusion of, look, this has been like a steering thing throughout my life. And I think the beauty of that story is like he's found power and control, I guess, in that lack of control. One thing I do talk a lot about with schools and talk about with teaching staff and things like that is how rigid sometimes curriculum is for lots of different, neurological typed people, and there's a lot of work trying to be done, don't get me wrong, to try and include as many different people and lots of different learning methods and things like that. But a lot of adults are now being diagnosed with what we know quite late in their life, if you want to call it late in their lives. And I think that it's kind of really great in a way that we're able to be open-minded enough to listen to those late diagnoses, if you want to call them, and actually empower ourselves with them. A friend of mine who's in his 40s has recently been diagnosed with ADHD, and he really, really struggled with the diagnosis. He didn't like it. It sent him very depressed. He was kind of very down about it. But coming out the other end, he's a different person. He is so empowered and so inspirational now, because he gets it so much more.
Absolutely.
And he gets the history of his 40 odd years a lot more. It's
it
kind of
makes
like
sense now.
yeah. So I can totally relate. I've had issues like that recently. Totally in a different way to Ty Pennington, I've got to say. I don't remember ever swinging from the from the window ledges and things like that, but and being naked in school. I was quite good in school, but I definitely was distracted in a lot of ways, and I definitely felt like I needed to have lots going on. Hence why I do loads of stuff now.
Yeah.
I always need to fill my mind,
Me
and
too.
actually that's a big side of it. So yeah, I'm kind of looking into it now. It's interesting.
Well, it's a great analysis, and I'm glad that I was able to pick an article that resonated with you a little bit, because that analysis was great. I need to thank you for that. But of course, thank you so much for taking the time to meet and sit down with my audience today. I also appreciate, of course, what you're doing with dads. You stressed what works for some does not work for all. And that's in everything in life. Don't give up. And there's something for you.
Yeah, there's a phrase. There's a phrase I always say to people: "There's no such thing as trial and error. Every single trial that you make, if it's a negative trial, laugh at it, smile at it, think to yourself, great, this is something that I never have to do again because it doesn't work for me, and just keep trying something else. Try.
Yeah, with that, man, I have to stop right now and ask you for your last word before we find out how to get in touch with you.
Yeah, sure. I think the one thing I want to leave everybody with is just to talk more. And, what I talk to people about is how you can do that. And one of the biggest things that I've learned is to try and not always succeed, because it's impossible to always succeed, but try to remove emotion from those conversations, and you will get more progress with those conversations. So I use this method called the prefix. Every time you have to have a different conversation with anybody about anything that's deep within your psyche, your mind, your brain, your gut, whatever, prefix the conversation. Say, I really need to talk to you about something really important. I don't want you to freak out. I don't want you to change your mind. I want you to just be an open mind and listen as much as possible and understand that this is hard for me. And prefix it with as much information as you need to make them understand this is hard for you. And that person will be more open to those responses that may come their way, and talk more and just keep those methods going. Don't just blurt things out and throw things at people.
I love the advice. Thank you, John. Would you now mind please taking the time to share where they can find your podcast, where they can find your guests on podcasts, everything you got going on, social media, you name it?
Sure. So I'm MH, that's Mike Hotel Support for Dads. So support for dads on Instagram. That's number 4 on Instagram. MH Support for Dads. I'm also kind of my company is Men Talk Links, and even if you're around the world, like just have a look on Men Talk Links on our socials, because on all socials actually, some of the content, it will always resonate with everybody around the world. But obviously, we are physically attributed to our county. But the big thing for me is kind of my podcast at the moment, and I really want to kind of reiterate that. It's called We Don't Do Deep, and it's basically where we get guests on who work in the sphere of mental health, and we have a respite, we have a bit of fun, and we talk about them. We get behind the curtains. We get to know them a bit more within their mind too, because often when you come across great advocates, all they ever do is talk about mental health, and that's great, that's fantastic, but we need to rest also. And I guess what we're trying to subtly get across to the audience is you need to rest as well. You need to chill, you need to have a bit of fun and just do your best to just relax. So We Don't Do Deep on all the socials. Check that out.
Thank you for sharing that. Everyone, be sure to check out all that content. There's a lot of value there, not just for dads, as you found out today. And while you're on social media, check us out too. I am at Vincent A. Lancy for all social media, YouTube. The website is vincentalancy.com. The show you can find on my website or at A Mental Health Break on all social media, except for Twitter. We're at Podcasts by Lancy. So you have updates from everything I do on my shows, including YouTube. My latest books, Mental Health Week, Mr. Lancy Talks Mental Health. They're on Amazon now. You can get through them on Amazon or my website. Let me know what you think. And with that, thank you for listening. We will see you next week on A Mental Health Break. John, thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you for having me, Vincent.